All right. Evening, everyone. Please be seated if you're standing. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Correspondence or Teacher's Training course. I'll be your teacher for tonight. I hope everyone remember where we left off last class in dealing with diversity and acceptance of diversity. We are in the acceptance unit. I want you to think of something today. I want you to think of this one statement before we start the class. As we get into this, we're going to be picking up on page 35 today. But keep this thought in mind. Today's students are tomorrow's leaders. Today's students are tomorrow's leaders. Okay, and it doesn't matter whether they're students of the age of 5 or 6 or 15 or 25 or even 30 or 50, right? The things that they learn today are going to affect the decisions that they make tomorrow, especially as they have an opportunity to lead. And, even though we're talking about diversity and accepting you, accepting me, which is the title of this chapter, we are in chapter 2 here. And again, for those of you who might be just joining us online on the Facebook Peaceful Solution Official Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Facebook page, you can find this book that we are covering this evening, which is the acceptance unit, by merely going to the character PDF to download, and you just click select more, and the drop down menu will give you the acceptance book that we are going to be covering. And of course it is the teacher's manual, because we are training teachers, right? We need many more teachers in society, not just to cover the basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, and so forth, but teachers to train people in character, positive character development. And we think about how this affects every aspect, every facet of society. Like they like to use the word in regards to gemstones. It talks about facets. That's the way that they describe the cuts. We don't have enough. We have a lot of people who do hold fast to certain morals, certain principles that they have been taught throughout their lives and growing up. And for the most part, these moral principles were held a lot more dear 50 or 60, 70 years ago, more so than they are today. We kind of live in a society where anything goes, right? You see it on the televisions, you see it on the internet, you see it in movies. It's a lot more loose, for lack of better words, in regards to morals. And it's pretty sad because, we're seeing the effects of this affect every part of mankind on an international scale, whether it's with the weather, whether it's with health as regards to that, even our prison population. The United States has the highest prison population of any country in the world. In fact, several large superpowers combined, the United States still outranks them in the number of prisoners or people that are incarcerated. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not something to boast about, right? As far as the land of the free is concerned, there's about 2.6 million who are not free, okay? And it's not, as we learned about the peaceful solution, we know, it's easy to point a finger. Society loves pointing a finger at people, but it's not necessarily their fault if they have not been given the opportunity to be trained in the moral principles that will help them govern their lives and their decision-making process so that they could be peaceful, productive, beneficial members of society. Well, this is why education is the key. And society puts so much effort from the time a child is 5 years old up until the time they're about 18 years old, in sending them to school and making sure that they get their education, so much so that in some areas, some cities, some states, if you don't send your children to school, then a parent can be faced with fines and possibly even jail time when their child is considered truant. So, they do put a lot of emphasis on education. The only problem is that it's not complete. It's not complete without the development of character. Teaching a child how to make right choices, teaching them how to control their emotions, how to interact with their fellow peers, how to interact and show respect to their teachers and their parents, how to interact with the environment, right? To respect the rights of ownership. These are things that encompass all areas of life. And once a person leaves school, well, those things are still there. And if a person doesn't learn how to interact with those things when they leave school, well, they're just going to have to make do with what they have. And that's part of the reason why we have so many people incarcerated right now here in the United States. Of course, it's not just the United States. It's many countries that have these same things. It's just on different scales. But we're going to be getting into or continuing with tolerance and making a difference and intolerance and looking at how we as individuals and of course as teachers teaching our students how to start to get their minds set on accepting diversity, right, and showing respect to people who might be a little bit different than they are, right? And I'm just I keep going back to the thought of the example of the apples and the differences in the apples, and we see it even with humans, with mankind. We have so many different varieties of people. I'm amazed at, when you go to different places or you see people from different countries, how you think about how we're made and our faces, and everybody for the most part has eyes, they have a nose, they have a mouth, they have ears, forehead, chin, cheeks, and so forth. But the different shapes and styles of faces that there are, it's just amazing to me how many different varieties there are. And even within the same culture, most of us here are, we're all Americans, but we all look different. You go to China and, to America, some people might say, well, they all look the same. But in China, well, they all look different. And a Chinese person can tell a Vietnamese person from a Japanese person, because there's that many differences. But, that 0.1%, that it's odd that, as we read in the previous classes that William covered, not so different after all on page 31. It says the world's population is an estimated 6 billion, of course it's 8 billion now, people, and only one race, sharing 99.9% of the same genes. We are not so different after all, with only 0.1% of our genes accounting for our physical differences. And oddly enough, society kind of, through their teachings and ideologies and some negative influences that have come down through the years, they put 99.9% of their effort focusing on that 0.1%, sadly, right? And this is what's caused so many problems and conflicts and discrimination and segregation and things of that nature going on, and still to this day, these things are going on throughout many, many countries, including here in the United States. And it's a very sad thing that this is even taking place, but it takes time, but eventually it will be eradicated. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Some of the great kind of leaders of yesteryear, I think even Dr. Martin Luther King made a quote, and he said, you don't have to see the entire staircase, you just need to see the first step. And you need to take that first step. Right, and it's the same thing with the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, because it's kind of funny to think about it. If you've ever driven in the dark from one side of the country to another, or to another, or just someplace in Texas, driving many miles on the open roads. In some places they're not big cities and it's very dark. Your headlights generally only broadcast about 200 to 300 feet in front of you. But when you think about it, you can drive thousands of miles, and only thing that you need to be able to see is those next 200 to 300 feet, right? But over the course of time, you eventually get to the point that you're trying to accomplish, your destination, so to speak, 1,000 miles away. Well, it's the same thing with developing a positive character. It's the same thing with changing who we are in life. We know where we're wanting to go because we've set a positive goal. But we don't have to see the entire road laid out in front of us. We just have to see what's right there in front of us, right? And work to take every step, one step at a time, using these positive skills, these principles that we've learned in the Peaceful Solution, to make sure that we don't get caught off guard, that we don't slip into one of those pitfalls, or, make sure we duck, when somebody throws a curveball at us or something like that. And just continually pay attention to ourselves so that we can earnestly make the right choice. And it's a difficult thing at times because sometimes emotions get involved, and in Texas here, you have to deal with a lot of heat. And when people get drained by heat, that starts to affect you physically, and it can kind of start to get you down emotionally. So we kind of have to be on guard about these things so that we can maintain that integrity that we want to have in developing this positive character that we've been covering for the last 7 chapters when you include, or 9 chapters when you include what we've covered already in the character unit. Now, I read this last class before we closed out, but I want to go back and reread it here on page LP2E. We're going to look at procedure 8. And it says, have students turn to page 35 and read the section entitled, It's All About Getting Along, and instruct students to complete the assignment found at the end of the page. Allow students time to share some of their ideas with the class. And of course, this is an activity that as a teacher, you would go over with your students to give them the opportunity. Like I've said before, this enables you to get feedback. This enables you to see what they're understanding and what they might not be understanding and what might need to be driven home a little bit stronger. Have students read the section in their handbooks entitled, It's All About Forgiveness, found on page 37, and discuss the questions at the bottom of the page, allowing students to write in their answers and encourage students to always practice forgiveness of others who have not yet learned this program. And that's a point that I would encourage you as teachers to drive home over and over, because it can be easy for a young person to think that because I have learned this, because I am learning this and I am practicing these concepts that are presented in the Peaceful Solution, that, hey, everybody is, right? And that's a great desire to have, kind of like when a person grows up in a home where they might not have much. They might not have heat, or they might not have certain things that everybody else has. They start to think that that's normal. Well, if they're learning this, they might think that, well, everybody's practicing these concepts, these skills, these lessons that are taught in the Peaceful Solution. But the reality of the matter is, no, everybody isn't. And there's going to be times when a student will encounter someone who is very disrespectful, somebody who still holds on to the intolerance that they've been taught and possibly has even been bred into them from their parents, their grandparents, and their great-grandparents. And so this gives them the tools, the armor, so to speak, to guard themselves, guard their minds, guard their character from being caught off guard and slipping back into a way that would breed retaliation and disrespect, and of course, as a result, more disrespect. So it says here, remind them that their example will be the best way to begin teaching acceptance to others. Of course, because the student, the individual, even us as teachers, we can't force change upon someone else. The best we can do is teach them, guide them, encourage them, motivate them, and of course, be that example. As the people have said and many times before, be the change you want to see. And with that, hopefully they will grasp hold and see the differences, the things that we are doing, and start to make changes in their own life. And it's not going to take place overnight. It does take time. And of course, as we get into goals and setting realistic goals, that's something that we have to be realistic about. These things aren't instant. Some people grasp hold of them and start to put it to practice in their life, and you start seeing results a lot faster than some others, but it doesn't mean that it isn't working. Okay, so as teachers, we have to maintain that character trait of patience, and of course being persistent, steadfast, and determined to accomplish this goal of changing the hearts and the minds of everyone and anyone who we have the opportunity to encounter. So let's look over to page 35 there, and then we're going to cover It's All About Getting Along. Like the previous teacher, William, talked about the quote, the comment that Rodney King made in those riots that took place, the LA riots, after he was mistreated by some police officers who, they had not been taught the development of positive character, and, they acted on emotions, and, one thing led to another, and you saw the ripple effect of how that spread out. I think many of us were around at that time and probably at least saw it on the television if we weren't at least maybe even living in Los Angeles at that time. We have people from different areas. But we saw that ripple effect and what took place and how that negatively impacted many communities and the lives of many people as a result. Because of a lack of self-control, that was a part of it. And people taking what they saw took place and responding negatively to it, right? Instead of finding peaceful ways to resolve these problems. Well, like he says, can't we all just get along? And that's what society needs to hear over and over and over and over again. It's all about getting along. And of course we can get along. Everybody can get along, irregardless of the what country you're from, what social status you have, the color of your skin, how you talk. It doesn't matter. Everybody can get along. But the key is being trained how to, and reversing the negative training that a person might have to look at another person and think, yeah, I could never be friends with that person, and start teaching them to look at the inside. Ignore what's on the outside and look at the inside, because when you make friends with a person, you're not making friends with a face, right? You're not making friends with the color of a person's skin, or how much money they have in the bank. You're making friends with the character of that individual. Whether it's positive or negative, you're associating yourself with that. And so that's what we have to kind of train people to see. This information that we're given, it kind of gives you your eyes a greater insight into a person's character. So it says here, in addition to accepting the diversity of others, acceptance is also about letting others know that you will interact with them in a way that is moral and respectful. Now, as we talked about a little bit about diversity here, the definition here, of course, it says diversity is the state of being diverse. I love when the dictionary gives you that. It's the state of being diverse. And of course, you go back and look at diverse, and simply it means different in kind, not alike, essentially different. And something that's different is not necessarily bad, right? We don't live in a society where everything is black and white. Or all white or all black, right? We have so many different varieties. This is what you see even in manufacturers of automobiles, manufacturers of clothes, developers of houses and neighborhoods and so forth. People like diversity. They like differences in things. Go to a restaurant and it's not all just potato, the potato restaurant, and all you can order is potato. Even somebody who loves potatoes, which I love potatoes, you tend to love things a lot when you're poor and you eat a lot of them. You kind of you start to eat more of them and find a lot of different ways to change up how you make them. But people like diversity. They like differences, in what they eat and what they wear and what they drive and what they live in and so forth. And so a lot of times people will associate different with negative. And that's what we have to try to retrain the minds and understanding that different does not mean negative. It just means it's something that's not the same as you, okay? And so accepting the differences, and that's what we talked about, of others, acceptance is also about letting people know that you will interact with them. And we covered that previously in the character unit. That interact means simply to act on each other, or to act reciprocally. I do this, you do that. A reciprocal action in a store would be, I buy the food, I give you the money, you give me the change, right? That's part of a reciprocal action. Another one, a simple reciprocal action is, I say morning to you, you say morning to me, okay? There is an interaction right there. Not all interactions have to be verbal, but nonetheless, we interact with people on a daily basis. It's interesting because interaction and interactive or interact, it's a verb, but it's also an adjective. An adjective is a word that expresses an attribute of something. I was horrible in English, and I didn't remember all those things, so kind of going and refreshing my memory, my mind on that is very beneficial, but it expresses an attribute of something, an adjective. So the interactive as an adjective means acting upon or influencing each other. Acting upon or influencing each other. Now you think about that when we work with and interact with one another, and others do the same with us, there is an influence that comes from us and an influence that comes from them. Okay? And as students of the peaceful solution, it's up to us to be able to determine whether that influence is positive or negative. Because in that case right there, we have two roads that we have to go down. One to focus on it. If it's a positive one, hopefully you're focusing on that. Or, choosing not to go down the road in which we would ignore it because it's something that's negative. But it's acting upon or influencing each other. Used especially, now to give the example here, used especially of drugs, because drugs have an effect on people when they take them. Or it says here, and I like this one, muscles that work together so the total effect is greater than the sum of the two or more. Okay? So the total effect is greater than the sum of two or more. Now you think about that, not merely from a standpoint of muscles that everybody here has them, I know. And if you have to pick up something heavy and one hand won't get it, and you lift it up with two hands, well, you don't want to hurt your back, so you squat, and then you lift it up with your legs as well. Now there's a lot more effort coming forth because now you've put together 4 muscle groups instead of just 1 or 2 in order to get that job accomplished. Well, think about it from the standpoint of us, each and every one of us as individuals. When each and every one of us are working to put into practice these positive moral principles, the total effect of peace, which we're working towards, is greater than the sum of just 1 or 2 people. Imagine if 1 million people were to put into practice these principles that we're covering here in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. Could you imagine how much better life would be? How much more affordable the things that you have to buy, each and every one of us rely on for our necessities, would be for every one of us? How you wouldn't have to worry about leaving your house and wonder, did I lock the door? Or leaving the shop and wonder, did I leave that? Or, did I lock my doors in my vehicle? Right? I got something, valuable in there. Because everybody will be practicing these moral principles, right? They will be interacting with one another in a way that won't bring harm to them. That's the benefit of the sum or the total of more than just 1 or 2 people putting into practice these positive principles, and eventually we will see it. But when this takes place, it shows people that we will interact with them in a way that is moral and respectful. Now, keep in mind what we covered regarding morals. That's in page 8 of the character unit, morals and moral principles in chapter 1. You can go back there and rehearse that if you'd like to a little bit later, but it gives you the definition of morals and how they're used and how we interact with one another, the environment, and the possessions and property of others. So we will show them, they will interact with them in a way that is moral and respectful. Let me just go right back here. Yes, let's go back and just refresh here on page 31. I believe we read this last class. We'll read it again here. Just to kind of tag off of that sentence. On page 31, under Not So Different After All, under the second paragraph, it says, acceptance means acknowledging the many similarities that exist between each member of the human race. Now we covered that. Similarities in a different word called diversity, differences. Okay? Well, not similarities, but we have many similarities that exist between the human race, but embracing the differences, those differences are the diversity, falls under that word diversity. The differences let me read that again. Acceptance means acknowledging the many similarities that exist between each member of the human race and embracing these differences by consciously, which means you have to put forth the effort to think about it. And this is something that all students of the Peaceful Solution, really strive to practice, to stop and think. Stop and think. And we reiterate this over and over and over. Stop and think before you proceed with a choice, whether it's something that comes forth from your mouth or something that comes forth from your actions. Stop and think about it first and think, is this going to bring about a beneficial result? Or will I be contributing to an already blazing fire of negativity that has been started? And think about what part you want to play and how that's going to affect you and others later. So embracing the differences by conscientiously making an effort to become more respectful towards people of other cultures and nationalities. It also means appreciating. Now, we talked about appreciating and thankfulness in the character unit, right? It could be very easy to murmur and to gripe and to complain about things that are different from you, or things that you don't understand, or things that just aren't going your way. But we should show this appreciation for the various nationalities and ethnicities. You know, it's because of those variations that we get so many different diversities in society. I mean, I don't know about you, but I do enjoy trying new foods. You know, new or different, healthy, beneficial foods, right? And I like certain things that might be a little bit spicy. I like curry dishes. I remember the first time that I had a genuine dish, a curry dish made from somebody who was native and knew how to make that curry dish. Man, it was night and day compared to what I had previously out of a frozen box, and I appreciate those differences. I appreciate the different types of foods and the different way things are made. And there are some things that I probably will stray away from. There's a fermented fish that's big in Lithuania and Sweden called surströmming. Has anybody ever heard of that? Surströmming? I think it's a fermented herring or something like that. Well, I say you're not missing anything, but I haven't never had it, but I've seen some videos of people opening it. This is a particular type of fish that's fermented for like 6 months with just enough salt to keep it from rotting. And from what I understand, from the videos that I've seen, the first time you open that can, you are met with a smell that is unlike any other. And some people have lost their lunch as a result of it, and some people have never been able to look at that fish the same way. But in certain cultures, in certain places, it's an absolute delicious meal. They serve it with on bread with some onions or crackers or whatever. So there's differences. Not everything we might like, or desire, but that doesn't make them bad. And like I said before, it just makes them different. Now it says here, instead of finding reasons to alienate each other, to separate, to put somebody, in a different corner, to make them feel like they're foreign or not a part of you. Instead of finding reasons to alienate each other, let's focus on all the similarities that we share. And this takes a person whose mind is set on always finding a peaceful solution, whose mind is set on acceptance, whose mind is set on showing respect towards other people, right? Because if it isn't, then it's easy to just cast another person aside because they're not like you, right? It's like it takes moral strength to make the right choice. It takes moral strength to stand up for what's right when everybody's doing wrong. It takes moral strength to look for the similarities in someone who might be different than you, okay? And it's important that we rehearse these things because if we don't, and we've been trained in certain negative concepts in the early years of our life, it could be easy to slip back into that if we're not careful. I think about that because right now I'm working on taking a foreign language course, and it's a little bit more difficult when you're older as opposed to when you're younger. But it is doable. The mind is very plastic, and it can be rewired, and easy to learn new skills, or it can learn new skills. But if you stop practicing on a daily basis, you begin to forget what you've learned, right? Now, once you practice it and you become fluent in it, well, you might not have to practice it as much, okay? But you do have to maintain it. And it's no different with our character. If we don't rehearse this information on a daily basis. They say in the course that I'm taking, just 15 to 20 minutes a day. 15 to 20 minutes a day will help you to learn a foreign language faster than if you were to go to a university or a college. Okay, and it's a little bit more than that. It's the way that it's designed and laid out. But it's the same thing. Take 15 minutes a day and go back over your lessons in the Peaceful Solution. 15 minutes a day and read a part on diversity or honesty or morality or leadership. To give yourself that food or that fuel to give your character the strength to get through the day. All right, so it says here, continuing back on page 35. Did you know that there are people who have careers in making visitors from other countries feel accepted? These people are skilled in what is known as diplomatic relations. Diplomatic relations, or in other words, they are diplomats. Now, you might be thinking that a diplomat is somebody who has to have a 4 or 6 year degree, to go to a prestigious college and have a piece of paper hanging up on their wall to show that, they went and took this course on diplomatic relations. Now they're able to go and welcome people from another country to their land. Not so. Each and every one of us are diplomats. Have you ever gone into a new state and stopped at the welcome center? Right? And the people in there, they greet you, and they, if you go to Texas, it's welcome to Texas, y'all. And if you go up north, it might be a little bit different accent. But they greet you, and they welcome you to their state, right? And they give you some pamphlets and show you some things about the state and places to visit and things like that. Well, it's no different with the different countries, and a person doesn't have to have a college education to be a diplomat. Just merely someone who welcomes another person. But there's something that they have to do, and we're going to look at this here in the next few sentences. They learn, notice here, they learn about the customs and practices of people from other countries, notice, to make visitors feel at home. And even when people come from different cultures and different countries, sometimes people will go out of their way to set up an area where they're going to be staying with things that are traditional to their home, to their country, or that might be traditional in their culture, to kind of make them feel more welcome. They might learn a greeting in their language to greet them with their native tongue. And I'm telling you, everybody that I've ever interacted with who speaks a foreign language, they really do like it if you can greet them or speak a little bit to them in their native language. Imagine being an American and going to a foreign country and nobody can speak to you in that language, in your language. You kind of feel lost if you're needing to get somewhere, or you're needing to buy something, or you're needing to do something. And the very first person who says, hello, sir, can I help you? Oh, it's like, oh, man, am I glad that you can speak English? And you feel welcome, and they make you feel welcome because now, you can communicate with them and you can express the things that you need and so forth. But they make people feel at home. For example, did you know that in some countries it is polite to belch after eating? In some countries it is. In some places it isn't. In class today, I heard someone do that, and I thought, I've been told that's a sign that the tank is full. When you hear somebody belch, that's a sign that the tank is full. They must have had a really great meal, And in some countries, it might be considered insulting if the host doesn't hear you belch, right? Did you not enjoy the meal, right? Did you not appreciate all the hard work that I did to prepare this for you? So keep that in mind, because if you do go to one of these countries, you might have to freshen up on your belching techniques if you're not one who burps. Some people just don't burp a lot. But not belching here, notice, it's considered rude. All right, it would be considered rude to not belch after your meal. Now, here in America, it might be considered rude to belch at the table. In some families, I've heard mothers say, don't do that. That's very rude. Don't belch at the table, So we have to be familiar with the customs. In fact, I believe that I'm not mistaken, the United States has 189 diplomats or diplomatic 189 diplomats in those countries, 189 countries. They have diplomats in every country or ambassadors in every country, and that's their job to interact and relay messages and so forth from the United States to them in order to maintain, somewhat peaceful relations, peaceful interactions. I looked up the word diplomats and diplomacy because you hear a lot about it if you ever watch the news and you see, some of the foreign ambassadors, people who are secretaries of foreign affairs and ministers of foreign affairs and so forth. They'll go and they'll meet with their counterparts, and they'll sit and they'll have talks and they'll try to hash out differences, hash out problems, and try to work out solutions. Well, the definition of this word diplomacy, because a diplomat is somebody who's skilled in diplomacy. So there's the definite, the dictionary for you again. But diplomacy, it says, is the established method. Now, here's something that's interesting because when we talked about interactive, remember the definition of interactive? It is acting upon or influencing each other. Acting upon or influencing each other. Okay, interactive. And the diplomacy is the established method of influencing the decisions and behavior of foreign governments and peoples through dialogue, which is, talk, negotiation, and other measures, notice here, short of war or violence. So let's try to find a solution before it breaks out to war or violence, okay? And sadly, when they can't find a solution, war or violence is their solution. Why? Because that's what they've been trained to do for hundreds and hundreds of years. Okay, if we can't work it out through dialogue and negotiation, then I guess we'll just have to go to war and, quote unquote, may the best man win, as the saying goes. Well, it says here, historically, this diplomacy meant the conduct of official, usually bilateral. Now, bilateral means involving two parties. It also means affecting both sides or having or relating to two sides. So bilateral relations or relations that have to do with both sides, a benefit coming from both sides or for or towards both sides. Bilateral relations between sovereign states, okay? But anyway, notice here, it's method of influencing the decisions and behavior. Because in a lot of cases, you'll see, if you ever watch the news, there is usually a conflict that will arise for whatever reason, and before war breaks out, because that's always looming on the horizon in today's society, sadly, well, they'll send the diplomats, right, to try to work it out so that we don't get to the state of war. And we have even some of the things that we covered in the peaceful solution where you saw diplomats coming together between Israel and the Palestinians. Back in the 80s, we saw diplomats working out things with the United States and Berlin in Germany. We saw things take place with the former USSR. In many, many different countries, things have taken place where diplomats have been sent to maybe even negotiate the release of hostages. That took place back in the 70s. I think it was, I don't know if it was the Iran-Contra affair or whatever, but, there has been a lot of conflicts, a lot of things that have taken place where diplomats were sent to try to work out a solution. Well, here are a few ways, go back to page 35 there. Here are a few ways you can practice your skills in diplomatic relations. Now, this is something that, we're not going to be sending our students to foreign nations to practice diplomacy, but as students, they are going to interact with people from different cultures. And they, the person might not even be from a different nation per se, but they might, their family might have been here for a long period of time, several generations, but they still hold fast to their culture, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And here's some skills that you can help them to learn to develop. And of course, this is going to show appreciation and acceptance and respect towards the other person who might be a little bit different than them. That 0.1%. Remember, we always keep it in mind that that's the only thing that creates that difference, 0.1%. So here's some tips here. Be determined not to make derogatory remarks or put others down for any reason. Any reason. People say that people fear things they don't understand. They fear things they don't understand. And it's not just things, but it's also people. People have a mindset towards people of different nations because of something maybe they might have saw on the news or read in a newspaper. But they don't know everything that there is to know about that person or that culture or that country or those people. And so as a result of those bits and pieces of information that might have been the result of one or two bad people, they judge the whole nation as being bad people. And so they're afraid of them. We've seen random acts of violence that have taken place. I remember when at the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, people were blaming China for the pandemic. And as a result, Chinese American citizens, they were being assaulted on the streets as if they were the ones that physically brought COVID-19 to the United States and dispersed it all over the place. That's the form of intolerance and hatred that we're talking about that must be eliminated. And so as a result of their fear or their hatred, they lashed out against these people who were just innocently going about their business, going about their life, and they were attacked brutally, And of course that puts people in fear, and they didn't want to, go out, they want to protect themselves and things like that. So these are the things that take place in our society that we have to be aware of. But be determined not to make derogatory remarks or put others down for any reason. Remember the Apple activity and avoid accepting negative concepts about others based only on their physical characteristics or places of birth. Now, had they not seen the faces of those Chinese Americans, they probably wouldn't have attacked them. They were only basing their display of hatred on their physical appearance. And it shows the tremendous amount of ignorance that they have in their mind for acting out that way. The next point here is choose your words carefully when speaking to others and communicate respectfully. Choose your word carefully. Some things that you say, even in our culture, might be considered disrespectful in other cultures. I've interacted with some people who from South America and, the Latin American community, the Latin American culture. And there are certain things that they hold very dear in regards to respecting the older generation, parents and grandparents and teachers, people who hold offices and so forth. They hold those people in great esteem and they show respect and honor to them. And whereas, some people who might, I'm not saying America is bad, but things have gotten slack in certain areas of life, and it's not necessarily America's fault, but it's just individuals who have not been trained to show respect towards, first off themselves, others, and their parents and teachers. But you wouldn't walk up to somebody like who's a grandmother or grandfather and say, "Hey man, how you doing?" That would be considered disrespectful. It would be considered very disrespectful. Even in the Asian culture in Japan, I've read some of their customs and how, people who are kind of the older generation and families, they're held in high regard. They're treated with the utmost respect. And it's looked down, you look down very, very bad. You look down quite a bit if you don't show that respect towards other people, people who are advanced in years. And so we have to be careful about how we choose our words before we speak, because some things we might say might be considered offensive to them in their culture, right? We need to be mindful about that even within our own culture. We'll get into we'll get into familiarity and how that can sometimes breed disrespect way down the road there. But our familiarity should actually breed greater respect for one another the more we get to know each other and see and understand and encourage the building of a positive character. But carefully choose your words when speaking to others and communicate respectfully. And that's the next chapter we're going to get into here in chapter 3 about positive communication leads to healthy interaction. So, keep these things in mind because they're little hints as to what we're going to be covering here in the future. And the next point there is learn about some of their customs so that you do not offend them and make them feel uncomfortable or unwelcome. All right. In some cultures, the men do not speak to the women. Okay, that's their culture. The only men that speak to the women are their family members, such as their husbands or their sons or maybe a brother. And if you don't know that, you might just ignorantly greet the husband and then greet the woman and stick out your hand to shake her hand, and well, they don't do that. And that might be considered offensive. In fact, in some cultures, they don't shake hands with certain hands because other things are done with those hands. So, it's beneficial to educate ourselves and to learn about them so that we don't do anything to make them feel unwelcome or to offend them. And not that you would go out to deliberately do this, but it takes a little bit of effort. Learning does take effort, and the more you do so, the better off you'll be. So here at the bottom of that, it says, by practicing these simple rules, you will gain many friends, even in a world full of hate. All right, so here's the activity here that you will go over with your class at the very bottom for the foreign exchange student here under that heading there. And it says here, your teacher informs you that there is a foreign exchange student who will be joining your class. You have been assigned as the class diplomat. Okay, now you see that, the class diplomat. They don't have a degree or certification or anything, but they're the person who is given this task. And like I said before, any one of us at any time could be a diplomat. The foreign exchange student does not speak your language well and is unfamiliar with the customs and practices of your nation. Your job is to help this new student feel comfortable and accepted in this new environment. You have one day to prepare for her arrival or his arrival to your class. No pressure, right? To learn as much as you possibly can about them and to be able to make them feel welcome. Well, a lot can be learned in the day with determination and effort. And then here it gives here at the bottom, it says, use the lines below to list some things you can do or say to make his or her stay in a new country a pleasant one. And of course, some of those answers might include teaching the foreign student principles that would ensure his safety and the safety of those he would encounter. Especially if, sometimes people come from areas where there is not a lot of, they come from very small areas, small towns or villages. They don't live in big metropolises. And it was interesting because several years ago when we went down to Argentina, and when we were traveling abroad on the roads, we were noticing that there was a lot of scooters and bikes and things like that. And not only people who were on scooters and bikes, but people who were just walking along the sidewalks. We were noticing that people who had backpacks were wearing them as front packs, right? They weren't wearing them as backpacks. And we asked one of the people down there, why is everybody wearing their bags as backpacks? And they said because people will come by and they'll snatch your backpack off your back. So it's a little bit harder for them to do it from the front because they'd actually have to get in your face, to do that. And they warned us about several other things, about, your phones being on your side or reaching out, and taking pictures, to be careful because people will run by and snatch your phone and take it, right? And so there are some of the things that people from different areas they might not be aware of. So as a diplomat, you would kind of, not incite fear in them, but just give them some tips that would help to keep them safe. Okay, and that would be a part of your job as a diplomat, or a part of that student's job as a diplomat in that activity. So let's look over to page 36 here as we move forward. Page 36. And it says here, be prepared. Be prepared. Let me see here. Just want to make sure I get. All right. Perfect. Okay. Just want to get prepared. All right. Be prepared. It says here, deciding to stand up for acceptance and tolerance means preparing your mind in advance to deal with intolerance on a daily basis. And this is kind of goes along in the same path that we'll be covering when we get. I keep bringing up the respect unit because a lot of this is incorporated from the very beginning through that. The respect unit is just focused. It focuses more on respect, but you'll see these same concepts spoken about from character all the way through responsibility. But in that unit we talk about in dealing with disrespect and preparing the child's mind, to realistically understand that not everybody is learning the peaceful solution at this time. And so the question is given, should I go out and expect to be disrespected every day? Should I expect to be disrespected all the time? No, you shouldn't expect to be disrespected all the time. But there are going to be instances where you encounter someone who has not learned these positive traits. So in that case, or in that situation, you need to be on guard and be ready, be prepared to put into practice the things that you learn and value from the units, the character unit, the accepting units, up to this point, to make sure that the situation is a peaceful one, right? To make sure it's not one that escalates out of control. If anything, you want to be the de-escalator of a conflict. Remember to be respectful even to those who are not tolerant. Being disrespectful and putting someone down because their background differs from yours is the exact ideology that promoted intolerance in the first place. And we went over some of those examples that were given, with Hitler and some of the other negative influences that we read about throughout history. And their teachings and their example, remember their example as well, it's not just words that came out of their mouth, but their example as well, it spread an ideology throughout an entire nation, or even many nations, right? That was one of intolerance and hatred towards people who were different or who didn't fit within that ideology or that concept. And so this can be a very powerful tool if used in an inappropriate way. It's powerful nonetheless, but if it's used in an inappropriate way, it will bring about this intolerance and hatred. If it's used in a beneficial way, it'll bring about acceptance and appreciation. Here, the last paragraph here, it says, you may not always be able to approach someone and talk to them about their views, but you can choose to be respectful and not partake in conversations or activities that promote racism, stereotyping, and intolerance in general. Okay, because there are going to be instances where, you're going to be around others who might be, talking about these very things. And, you might not necessarily be able to go to them and say, hey, you shouldn't be talking about that, right? Because some people, people not being trained in the peaceful solution, they don't mind lashing out verbally or sometimes even physically. So you don't ever want to, remind your students this, you don't ever want to do something that will put yourself in danger, right? You can choose to just walk away. You can choose to not be a part of it, right? You can choose to not laugh at it, as we talked about in the example where the boy's brother was telling him a racist joke. Right? And that says a lot. That also solidifies a part of your character in regards to what you will accept and what you will reject. So now, I think here, I think we're going to stop here on page 36. But yeah, and we'll pick up on 37. Let me just go back here really quick and make sure of something before we close out. Yes. We'll stop there on page 36, but just keep these things in mind here, and kind of rehearse, if you will, this evening, page 36, and being prepared, because you'll see this same theme presented in the units that are to follow, worded a little bit differently in regards to being prepared, setting your mind in advance, and so forth. Because we should never, and we remind our students this, we should never go out of the house not being ready to put into practice the principles that we've learned in the peaceful solution. The moment we let our guard down is the moment something will take place that in which we respond negatively, right? So never let your guard down. Remember the example that was shown in the previous chapters of the boy behind the wall, the brick wall, trying to guard himself from all the different negative influences that were being thrown at him continuously. Well, we need to, that peaceful solution is like our brick wall to guard us from the negative influences, the negative interactions that might come from somebody who has not been trained in this, right? And not that we have to continuously hide behind a brick wall and never do anything, but that brick wall should be there to protect us from those things. And the more we study this, the more we set our minds in advance and are prepared, in setting realistic goals to deal with people who have not been taught these values and who, still hold fast to intolerance and hatred, the better equipped we're going to be to make sure at least we leave that situation in a peaceful solution and don't add to the hatred and intolerance that we see in society. So we're going to stop there on page 36, and we'll pick up on 37 next class. And our next class will be Wednesday, August 4th at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Again, thank everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and participating in this course. And we look forward to seeing you in just a few days. Have a great evening, everyone.